The wind howled across the wide and empty plains, carrying with it the dust of the desert and the scent of old wood and forgotten towns. It was a place where loneliness lingered longer than shadows, and men worked the earth with cracked hands and hardened hearts. Jacob Miller, a weathered rancher in his 50s, had spent most of his life in solitude, tending cattle, fixing fences, and listening to the creak of the wooden porch as the only music to accompany his quiet evenings. He had lost his wife years ago to fever, and though the years had buried that grief beneath layers of work and dust, a hole remained in his chest, a hollow space where warmth and companionship used to be. He had no children, no neighbors within miles, just the stubborn land and the animals that depended on him. One morning, riding out early to check the northern fences, Jacob spotted something unusual against the wooden posts that marked his property's edge. From afar, he thought it was a rag caught on the fence wire, fluttering like a wounded bird. But as he drew closer, his horse's ears flicking uneasily, he saw it wasn't cloth at all. It was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 16, her dark hair tangled and her hands bound with rough rope to one of the fence posts. Her dress was dusty, torn at the hem, and her face carried the weight of both exhaustion and defiance. Her lips were dry, her eyes red from either crying or the sun, but there was no mistaking the fire still burning in them. Jacob reined in his horse sharply, dismounting in disbelief. "Good Lord," he muttered under his breath, rushing toward her. The girl flinched as if expecting another blow, but Jacob's hands went straight to the knots, rough fingers fumbling until he finally freed her raw wrists. "Who did this to you?" he demanded, his voice steady but carrying a storm beneath it. She stared at him for a moment, breathing hard before whispering, "My father." The words dropped like stones into the silence of the plains. Jacob froze, searching her face for a sign of a lie, but there was only truth, bitter and sharp. He didn't press her yet, just helped her to his horse and lifted her gently into the saddle. "Let's get you inside," he said softly, leading the horse back toward his ranch. Inside the small, sturdy cabin, Jacob poured her water and gave her bread, watching as she devoured it with the desperation of someone who hadn't eaten in days. Only when her hands stopped shaking did he ask, "What's your name?" "Clara," she said quietly, brushing crumbs from her lips. "Clara Thompson." Jacob nodded, leaning back in his chair, his mind working furiously. "And why would your father tie you to a fence like some animal?" Her eyes flickered with pain, but her voice held steady. "He said I was a burden, said there wasn't enough food for both of us. He drank away the little money we had left. When I tried to stop him, he said I was nothing but trouble, and he left me there to die." Jacob's jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. He had seen cruel men before, men who took out their failures on those weaker than them, but to abandon your own child, your own flesh and blood, was a sin too deep to name. "You're safe here now," he finally said. "Ain't no one gonna tie you up again, not while I'm around." Clara's eyes shimmered, and for the first time her shoulders sagged in relief. The days that followed were slow but transformative. Jacob gave Clara a room that once belonged to his late wife, fresh sheets aired in the sun, and clothes from an old chest that fit her just enough until he could arrange more. She followed him around the ranch, first silently, watching, then gradually with questions. "How do you fix a saddle? Why do the cattle move together like that? Don't you ever get lonely out here?" At that last question, Jacob paused, his hand tightening around the fence post he was repairing. He looked out at the horizon, where the sun dipped low, painting the sky in oranges and purples. "Every day," he admitted quietly. Clara didn't reply, but the next morning he found her on the porch, sweeping dust away, humming softly to herself. Her presence began to fill the empty spaces of the ranch. She cooked meals, sometimes clumsily, sometimes with surprising skill. She laughed occasionally, a sound that startled Jacob at first because he hadn't heard laughter within those walls in so many years. And slowly, the weight of loneliness lifted, replaced by something gentler, something almost like hope. But the world doesn't let go of its shadows easily. One evening, as Jacob was bringing in the horses, he saw a rider approaching from the distance. The man swayed in his saddle, hat pulled low, the stink of whiskey carrying even before he spoke. It was Clara's father. "You got something that belongs to me," the man slurred, sliding off his horse with a sneer. Jacob stood his ground, tall and immovable as the land itself. "If you mean Clara, she don't belong to you? You left her to die." The man spat into the dirt. She's my daughter, my property, and I'll take her back whether you like it or not." Jacob's eyes burned like coals. He hadn't raised a child of his own, hadn't known what it was to protect someone so young and fragile, but in that moment, something rose in him, an unshakable resolve that this girl would never again be subjected to cruelty. "You listen here," Jacob said, voice low and dangerous. "You tied her to a fence and left her for the vultures. You forfeited any right to call yourself her father the moment you chose whiskey over her life. If you come near this ranch again, you won't be walking away." The drunkard laughed, a hollow, ugly sound. He lunged forward, but Jacob's hand was quicker, pushing him back with the strength of a man who had wrestled storms and built his life with grit. Clara, who had come running to the porch, stood frozen, fear in her eyes. Jacob looked back at her and said firmly, "Go inside." The confrontation ended with the man stumbling back onto his horse, muttering curses as he rode off into the gathering dark. Jacob knew it wouldn't be the last time he tried, but he also knew the ranch was no longer just his. It was Clara's refuge now, and he would defend it with his last breath. Over time, Clara blossomed under the safety and guidance Jacob provided. She learned to ride horses with confidence, to mend fences, even to read by the light of the oil lamp at night as Jacob taught her from his late wife's books. She laughed more often, and Jacob found himself smiling again, something he hadn't thought possible. The bond between them deepened, not of blood but of something stronger, chosen family. They were two broken souls who had found healing in one another. As the seasons changed, so too did the ranch. Where once silence reigned, now there was conversation, laughter, and the clatter of dishes shared by two instead of one. Jacob was no longer just a lonely rancher. He was a protector, a mentor, and in many ways the father Clara had always deserved. And Clara, once a discarded girl tied to a fence, had become the heart of a home. Friends, this story is not just about survival. It's about second chances, about the kind of family that's forged not by blood, but by love, sacrifice, and the courage to protect what truly matters. If you believe in stories that inspire hope, resilience, and the triumph of the human spirit, then make sure to subscribe to this channel. Because here, every tale we share is a reminder that even in the harshest deserts of life, love can bloom where you least expect it, and broken lives can be pieced together into something beautiful again.